Welcome to this webinar on product positioning. I've looked forward to host this session on a super interesting topic that I think usually doesn't get all the attention that it maybe should have with everything else that goes on in the world of marketing. My name is Niels. I'm a partner at Quadrant Consulting. I've been working with marketing, branding, sales in that intersection for the last 15 years and predominantly with B2B companies. For the ones that doesn't know Quadrant, we are a specialized consultancy helping customers grow, focused on branding, marketing, and sales. We are 25 nerds working out of Copenhagen, and we do a lot of work within the field of positioning strategy, go-to-market strategy, product launch and implementation, portfolio marketing, and the likes that kind of touches on this topic that we have today. In this session, we will go through 4 main items. So start talking a bit about why product positioning is a make or break thing. Dwell a bit on our hard-earned beliefs, on what we believe is the right way to approach this topic based on the learnings that we have had. And then, of course, dive into what makes a great product positioning. And at the end, we'll have a small bonus on AI. There won't be a good webinar without AI these days, right? I'll also try to make time for Q&A at the end. So hope you dive into the topic, lean in and ask questions, and then let's take it at the end and have a good discussion there. So first and foremost, why is product positioning a make or break thing? I think from the lens of marketing, there's a lot of great promises that are usually battered out in the boardroom about the good opportunities, about how marketing can leverage new mandates, data, personalization, increase efficiency, and get more bang for the buck. Also, companies that really places marketing at the core of their strategy are also inclined to have better growth than peers. I think those statements are usually what is given in theory and given in the boardroom, but in practice, it doesn't always work out as planned. And I think some of the research we've made at Quadrant shows, for instance, that more than half of all product launches tend to fail on expectations and not succeed with the objectives that was set. So why is that? And I think dwelling a bit on this from a marketing lens, I think problems in marketing are often seen on different layers. Usually when you don't need the performance that you expect, you tend to look at the surface of the problem. So our campaign is not performing, we're not converting as we intended or as we forecasted, or it may also be that people don't believe that the creative doesn't work as intended. So the immediate solution is to start fixing that. Try to change the channels, try to change the creative, or reallocate some budget. Underneath that, I think immediate solutions, if you go further in, is often found in looking at the capabilities in our team, or do we need to reshuffle the budget in the way we plan our investments? Do we need to change our KPIs and the like? But I think often where the real discussion needs to be is at some of the root causes that can be connected to concepts like positioning. So who's our product aimed for? Who do we compete against? And how do we really show that we have a different way of approaching a customer problem than some of our main competitors? And I think in this room, some of the mindsets that can often compromise positioning are connected to being too product-like, over-engineering the solution, focusing on what can be done. Could be something like the Apple Vision Pro, right? We could make this work, so why don't we just go out and sell this? Or maybe also a tendency to lack on sufficient customer and market orientation. Understand the customer real problems and real use cases of how they're actually using the product. I think a dangerous statement to make is often we'll just educate the market on how to use this product. I think that's a really big task to succeed with, and it's often not successful. Often there's also a bit of reluctance to change investment that has already been made. So we are so deep into going down this way of bringing this product to market. We've invested a lot in collaterals, in training our people. So we will commit to this and stay to this track. And then I think the big classic here is having a hard time making a choice. So selling to everybody and selling to no one. Having no ideal customer profile in mind makes it incredibly hard to really flesh out a distinct, differentiated positioning for what your product can do. So I think often some of the problems we experience at the surface of marketing, they need to be treated at the core and try to understand some of these root causes that are often connected to positioning or the actual features of the product. And at the end, I would claim that every single sales and marketing tactic somehow uses positioning as a foundation. So if we fail at getting the positioning right, we fail at marketing the product. If you experience issues converting in your campaigns, it may be because you don't have a strong enough understanding about the use cases of your product and how it solves a problem for your customers. If your sales team is brought to the table mainly to discuss cost and feature comparisons, that's not really a good place to be, and that's not a conversation you really want to have. Or if you really don't see that your messaging is resonating with the target group, then it may lead them to look at competitor products. And I think all of these indications somehow shows that you have a position issue. I think I've even heard of stories about a hardware producer coming to a customer and meeting a procurement team that has just split the component completely apart and looking at the price of each individual part in the component, 10 cents for this screw, 20 cents for this flywheel, and trying to decide on a price from that. And that's just not a good conversation to have. So the potential in positioning is really to drive the conversation into a new place that often is more connected to value and how we can derive differentiated value for a specific type of customers. And this talk about changing messaging, changing our pitch and so forth, it can really be hard to connect to revenue at the end of the line. But I think one good example has been given by April Dunford, who's written a super good book on positioning. She used to work in a CRM company that kind of had a one-size-fits-all approach, competing in this huge CRM market with thousands of big competitors, and also some very big ones that are really, really hard to get off the shortlist, Salesforce and HubSpot and so forth. When she was a CMO for this company, they ended up taking a decision on really focusing the product towards a specific segment and create the best CRM for investment banks. That came out of a recognition that some of the attributes and features in the platform actually serve the needs of investment banks quite well. This was a very focused decision, but at the end of the day, product positioning is very much about taking choices and also making sure you get your priorities right, so you can really focus on where you create differentiated value. So at the end, like putting it simply, getting product positioning right is about getting the right context set for how buyers think of your product. Brains naturally seek to kind of make sense of new things they meet. It happens for us as consumers. It happens for professional buyers as well. If you see a new soft drink, you kind of quickly resonate. Is this like a soda? Is it a juice? Or is it an energy drink? Or how should I think of this new product? The same happens in professional markets. So for buyers, effective positioning really helps them understand how they should look at your product and what they should compare it with. And if we don't establish this context, the risk is that the customers will form their own perceptions, and it may not always be in our favor. Putting it super simple, winning positioning means you'll find some kind of way to connect customers to your product, leading to sales. So at Quadrant, we've worked quite a lot with positioning, and we've tried to gather some of our hard-earned beliefs on how we believe that this question is best tackled. And I think when I say hard-earned, it's really hard-earned. So we've also tested out different approaches and worked across a lot of different companies. And I think it's really hard to find a one-size-fits-all approach because the context, situation, products, and competitive situation is always different. But I do think that there are some rule of thumbs that are good to keep in mind for having a good process around getting a sharper product positioning defined. So we've gathered 7 core beliefs that we use to form our approach to working with product positioning. And I think one of the first ones are that there's a big risk in conflating positioning, branding, and purpose. While the concepts are definitely interlinked, they are also very different in their nature. And I think in general, there is a need to maybe be more distinct around what is the difference between these different concepts. Too often they are being mixed in workflows and processes, and it doesn't always help the outcome. So I think positioning, if you're a chef, right? Positioning is like the ingredients, it's the idea of your dish, and it's how you create a unique meal that customers will actually buy today because they see it as a good dish. Your purpose is the reason you became a chef and how you aspire to change food habits maybe, and that's what you work towards. That's your Northern Star that guides you in your endeavors. And branding ultimately is the presentation of your dish. I think maybe connected a bit to this belief, I would also advocate that positioning is not a creative exercise. It is often mixed to think about ideas, to think about expressions, but positioning is about these core commercial questions on who do we want to be something for, which problems and use case do we solve, what key attributes can we use to back it up, and how do we really formulate a distinct approach to solving a customer's problem. That is not connected to creativity. I think if you bring in creativity to that mix, then you get all kinds of opinions, also often from outside the room you work within, from husbands and wives that likes this idea, don't like this idea. And it's a really big risk of leading you astray from making some of these core choices. Creativity definitely has a big role to play in the way you deliver a positioning, but not in how you formulate it. Also, product positioning is really a cross-functional discipline. You really need to bring in the right people in the room to make sure that you deliver and develop a rigid solution, but also something that people can understand and see how to apply at the end. I think the big risk is that it stays in the marketing team and developing a positioning in marketing for marketing that never really leaves the room. Instead, bring in frontline people, bring in your sales team, bring in your product team, bring in management, bring in customer success, bring in maybe also your board or your founders or your owners, because some of these discussions can be quite fundamental to the strategy of the company. And positioning is super closely interlinked with messaging. So the decisions you make and how you want to position a product really has to distill straight into messaging and how you present your solutions to customer across your touch points. It's not just high-level statements. They need to be backed up by proof, social proof, factual proof, evidence-based, ideally quantifiable on the claims that you want to make. So zoom in on the substance to build your messaging as a core part installed in the way you develop your positioning. And then maybe for some a bit controversial one, but I think often too much responsibility is put on the shoulders of the customer. Customers can't take the choices for us. They can help us validate if we're going in the right direction, but they can't help us make the choice on how do we solve a problem and how are we different to competitors. That is something that happens in the commercial room. And then, of course, it's always a good idea to go out and validate it with customers once we've made that decision. And then one that I've maybe myself changed opinion a bit on during the years, but I think what you learn in school is that positioning tend to be a fixed thing unless there are big changes to strategy and so forth. I think for some companies it makes sense to think of it a bit more as a living organism. Of course, we need to be sharp on how do we create value to customers here and now, and why customers choosing us here and now, and build the positioning from there. But depending on the industry you're in, positioning also has to change. I think especially if you are working with tech or a tech-connected product, you are probably likely exposed to changing needs, changing trends, changing technologies that can change the fundamental value you deliver to customers. So it makes sense to look at your positioning not just as a 5-yearly thing or something you do when you have a problem, but actually have it as an installed mechanism that you look at maybe every 6 months or whatever makes sense in your world. Are we still on point in regards to how we are standing out in this market? What's happening in a competitive context? What's happening with our product? What's happening with the customers' use cases and their needs? And then ultimately, positioning can quickly end up in long analysis and long report writing. But at the end of the day, it's about changing people, and it's about changing the way that we make a pitch and how we build our website and how we interact with customers. So I would advocate maybe focus a bit less on the report writing, focus more on facilitating these discussions internally and also bringing them to life in your organization. Positioning is really a change driver. It may change the conversations you need to have with customers. It may change the sales approach you take and how you prioritize accounts. It also may change the decision maker and buyer type you need to talk to. So 7 core beliefs that to some extent formulates the way that we think about product positioning at Command and the way that we've chosen to work with it on our projects. So that, of course, brings us to a question on what makes a great product positioning. And I think here it usually makes sense just to dwell a bit on some of these key concepts that you meet within work on product positioning. Often we talk a lot about positioning, statements, frameworks, messaging, copywriting also has a role here. And then, of course, advertising, depending on who you are, also has some kind of a role. So concepts that are clearly interlinked, but play a different role in how we formulate a strong product positioning. I like to think about positioning like it's how we want to be seen and by whom, helping guide some of these core choices. Messaging is what we want to say to make it clear how we are better. Copywriting, how we say it, bringing in our brand and personality. And advertising is how we create campaigns to push the message. Working with product positioning, we tend to split it up in kind of 3 fundamental components. So facilitating a discussion around a core positioning framework that can help you make core choices on who, what, and how questions. Working directly into substantiated messaging as part of your position exercise. It's not an afterthought, it's installed directly in the process to align internally and external understanding of how does this position actually come to play. What are we saying on our website? What are we saying in the sales pitch? And from there, work directly into some of these core sales and marketing touch points. And I would say usually the website and the sales pitch has to be touched somehow if you go in and change your product positioning, together with a lot of other touch points. When we start working with defining the positioning, where we really want to end up is in a place where we can clearly articulate how we deliver differentiated value and to whom. So what does our product do well? What does competitors do well? What does our customers want? How can we make sure that we land in this sweet spot between all of these dimensions? We've tested and tried different frameworks throughout the years, and I think there are some that are good, and I think there's tons available and tons of gurus that has developed a plethora of positioning frameworks. I think there's some of these frameworks that has some flaws, and I think a risk is to jump straight in on crafting a positioning statement, or maybe also utilizing classic gain-pain methodologies. And I think while these frameworks can be good and have a purpose as part of the process, they can't stand alone because they don't force you into taking choices. I think just jumping in and crafting a positioning statement often ends up with including everything, not taking a clear choice and not interlinking how the focus you have on customers connects to the attributes of the products and connects to the category that you've chosen to play in. Instead, we like to think of positioning as an interdependent string of choices. So the choice you make on ideal customer profile or target group kind of sets the scene of the competitive context that you stack up against and how you build a strong proposition and storyline on how you take a different approach to competitors and which category you're in and what attributes that you build that positioning on. So instead of just crafting a statement, it's more about facilitating a string of choices and having a framework that can help you do that. We like to think about positioning as coming in layers. Often these discussions, they start with some kind of a strategic framing. Usually we don't just start from a blank canvas. Often there is a commercial strategy that we're building a product positioning above. There's commercial priorities, and there's also some kind of idea of what segment or ideal customer profile are we focusing on. That can of course be challenged and be revisited, but I think often a good way to start the discussion is to clarifying who do we exist for and what problems do we solve. That is connected to really writing out your ideal customer profiles, competitive context on what type of competitors are we up against, and how are we a different type of player in this market, and how does that set the scene for which category that we play within and how we describe the category that we are within. Those are some fundamentals that can actually quickly serve up a full day discussion in a management team if there's not clarity on this. But having this as the backdrop of moving into the closer positioning related discussions, usually I like to start by discussing what can we deliver. So what's the key attributes of our solution, of our product that stands out and are really the sources of value to customers. And the next layer is kind of trying to formulate that into strong USPs. So a classic concept, trying to identify key selling points, but doing it in a frame of how do we do it differently than competitors. Which should lead us to a clear way of articulating what is the value to each customer segment or each buyer type that we're focusing on. How can we translate our attributes and USPs into clear value for the ideal customer profile that we have chosen to focus on? And at the end of the day, how can we on top of these layers build and articulate a clear direction on what is our way of solving a problem within this category, and how is that approach different to some of the key competitor types that we're stacking up against. So we like to think of these discussions around product positioning as coming in layers, because it helps us taking the core choices on strategic framing, but also building our proposition and positioning approach out of what we are really good at and who do we want to be something towards. Straight out of positioning framework exercises, we like to install messaging as part of the work. And messaging, of course, is how we express the position that we have. Risk here that it becomes too fluffy and it doesn't become substantiated enough. Some core rule of thumb is that messaging, if it has to be good, has to be specific, has to be evidence-based and data-backed. Usually also flavor plays some kind of a role. So how does it become memorable? Be simple so everybody can comprehend it, and of course be on brand so it fits within our universe. Proving your messaging, some of the triggers to do that is often to really do fact-finding, be fact-based, or get social proof from customer validations. Utilize awarded certifications. It can also be that you can use reviews and testimonials to back up your points. If there's objective comparative data on how you can stack up against some of the key competitive approaches. Or of course, at the end of the day, best thing ever, use cases from customers with clear results and the demonstration of our ROI. Great messaging also has to be accessible. So I love this term grab-and-go messaging, and I like to think of it that at the end of a positioning process, there needs to be some kind of a blueprint. It can be a booklet, or it can be a slide deck, or whatever. I know in pharma, in the world of pharma, often there's an e-detailer that has all the truths about how we want to talk about this product, that also is often cleared by legal and so forth. But having this one point of truth on your positioning and messaging is just key, because it's easy to work with and it helps you steer and control how your product is served in your channels. So having some kind of a blueprint that can be quickly moved into a sales pitch, go on the website, act as a source of reference for a campaign or LinkedIn post, so you don't have people or agencies coming up with something entirely new. And I think that's the last point I will make here on how to work with positioning. Usually it's just so powerful to work straight into the sales pitch, into the sales deck. Great positioning messaging at the end of the day is designed to help win our sales pitch. So instead of, which maybe can, and I've been the victim of this many times myself, maybe can be a trait of marketeers or agencies, is to do a product launch campaign. You create a good story, a fantastic concept, and a way to express it. And then you do these 10 glossy slides that you hand over to sales and say, here's our fantastic story. Please talk with customers about this. And then for them, then it's up to themselves to put together the rest of the pitch and connect our product to the customer's needs. Usually these glossy slides are not used, thrown into the bin by the sales rep, and then they instead use what they have, throwing together what they've used in the past. So I think instead, a really good way to work around product position is to work straight into the collaterals and work together with the commercial teams on formulating a new pitch. I'm not going to go so deep into that here, but actually my colleague Christian, he recently held a great webinar on how to do compelling sales pitches and to win the golden pitch. It's available on our website, so if you want to, go check it out. And then I think I promised at the beginning that I will quickly dwell on AI at the end. Because I think right now a lot of commercial teams, they are struggling, battling a bit with this evolving trend of AI, the big hype on it. A lot are also working with it in their solution, in their products. There's some kind of an AI-enabled feature coming into their product to make it better, make it different. Given the size of this trend, it's fair to ask the question, does it actually change our positioning when we install AI into our solution? And I think the simple way to take this discussion is to take the point of view of the customer. So is AI changing the customer value fundamentally? Does it really allow the customer to utilize our solution for a new use case? Or does it deliver on an entirely new value level than what it used to be? Then yes, it may be that you need to change your positioning and update your messaging correspondingly. However, I would say that most often, and I think the cases we work with up until now, AI is usually more a way of enhancing existing customer value and enhancing what made you a winner in this industry up until today. So for most companies, I would say that AI as a new feature is not a new separate market. It's a technology, it's a trend that, yes, you need to incorporate in your messaging, but usually it doesn't change the fundamentals of your positioning. At the end here, what's a good way to get started on working with your product positioning? In essence, there's 4 good steps to take. First, I think it's really to get the baseline down, understanding our markets, competitors and their offerings, our own products, key attributes and differentiators. Use that to facilitate discussions on core choices, and based on that, prototype a way to describe your positioning and test and validate it with customers. Work straight from there into specific substantiated messaging, and also try to get to a point where it becomes a grab-and-go messaging repository that's one source of truth that, yes, can always be updated, but it doesn't go for everyone to do it. And at the end, of course, the real value happens in the channels, in the sales meetings, in your pitch situations. So usually there's some kind of an exercise on aligning website and sales pitch and more. So with that said, I think we've come to the end. I hope you enjoyed and you could recognize some of these discussions from your own work. If there's any questions, I'm happy to take it. So please drop them in the comment field, and let's take a look at that. Yes, so I think I have a good question here. So how do you know if you should consider to reposition your product? Good question. Where does this start from, right? I think usually coming back to the first section we talk about, I think there are some experiences in the front line, in the sales channels, or in the customer dialogues that kind of indicates that something is off. It may be that we are losing pitches. It may be that we are not being invited to sufficient amount of RFPs. It may be that we are not converting in our campaigns as we used to do. So maybe there's been some changes in the way that customers use your product. There's been some changes in the way that the competitors they offer and stack up their solutions that could indicate that you need to go back into the engine room and understand whether your positioning is off or needs calibration. So I think usually those indications in the front line quickly materialize, and it raises the question that there might be something here to look at. Next question here. I have experienced that customers use a product in another way than intended at launch. How do you suggest incorporating customer feedback and market research into refining and optimizing our product positioning strategy over time? Yes, super good question. I think usually a lot of, when you develop a new product, usually it's a long process, big investments. Commercial teams are really pushing the limits to get to a deadline, and then you push the product out. And somehow often maybe forget that there's a user at the end that may not use the product as intended. So I think having it more as an iterative, a live process where you maybe do piloting, depending on the size of the product launch you do, but do piloting with key customer groups to try to understand if the position we've actually thought of and created is actually materializing in the use case they're using it. Does it actually add the value that we've intended, or do we experience something completely different and see that they actually use it for new purposes? Then we need to go back and calibrate the way we describe the core positioning. So yes, I think it's a really good thing to have an iterative process and not do a big bang where you develop everything in-house, push it to market and see what happens. Instead, take in the research and usually from prioritized customer panel or customer group that you can have some confidential discussions with. Yes, hope that answered the question. So a long one here. Seems like we are linking strategy and positioning very closely. You usually only have one strategy, but how many product positionings should you have? In examples, thinking of course in the sense that we call it product positioning and not company positioning, you could have multiple sub-strategies for everything. So just think about how you differentiate between them at current. Yes, extremely good question. I think as always, it depends, right? So do you have a broad plethora of products in your portfolio where each of them has a unique value to bring? Or do you have a more lean portfolio where maybe you have a hero lead solution that kind of brings the customers in, and then underneath that you're upselling to other solutions? For instance, that could be, I think when Salesforce launched, Marketing Cloud was not really a thing at the day. So I think it was the CRM system that was the lead positioning for the company. Then over time, I think Marketing Cloud and the other solutions has kind of come up on par with the CRM part of the platform to become a multi-product positioning. So I think it kind of depends on the situation. So are you a one product, one brand company, then it's easy. Do you have multiple products? Then you need to understand the interlink between the company positioning and how you guide customers to the right solution underneath that. So I think it depends too much on the situation and the context of your portfolio. And here's a question on which companies can you point towards who have changed their product positioning to the better, being challenged with limited feature differentiation and growing competition. I think, at least based on my own experience, I've worked with component brands in industrial markets where they have their claim to fame and the position they have are usually built on strong capabilities for the component connected to engineering, quality, rigidity in the solution, and innovation on the component side. But usually all of these component producers are exploring IoT, they're exploring advanced analytics, they're exploring how they can utilize data to extract value. So usually I think working with that type of market, there's a clear change in the value that is being brought to the customer, which also means that you need to go in and recalibrate your positioning, because it may mean that your product are usually being bought by different buyer types, or at least additional buyer types in a broader buying center, and you need to go in and find a way to build a strong positioning around a new approach that's both on the mechanical side and on the data and connected side. Any tips for how to understand your competitors better? If all you have is publicly available info and aren't sure of their specific approach to deliver the product, how can you be sure you're differentiating? Yeah, I think usually there's a lot of value in the front line of a company, talking with customer success, talking with your sales reps that's out there in customer meetings, because they're really usually giving hands-on examples of why we are being chosen over competitors, or why competitors are being chosen over us. So I think that's actually the first-hand resource of intel on that, and then you of course can supply that with desk research and looking at competitors' collateral and into classic industry reports and so forth. And ultimately, of course, talking yourself with customers is also a prime source of insights on this. So I think pushing to the front line to get this intelligence firsthand, not through a survey, but firsthand through a conversation, usually gives the best intel and the best meat to the bone to understand the actual differences. How do you suggest, yeah, last question here. Did we have one? Yep. How do you suggest involving stakeholders and leadership in the positioning process? Yes, I think it's very much a facilitation exercise. So facilitating these core discussions around the core choices on what do we want to put into our positioning strategy. So usually what we do is to run interviews and sessions to give input. We do half of full day workshops with the full management team to facilitate these discussions based on observations we've made and also on the beliefs of people inside the company. And then based on that, try to get to a definition and write out product positioning based on for instance, the framework you saw at the presentation here. And then we can take that description and go out and validate with customers. It may also be that we can validate it with the board or with owners or people in the front line to get some input back that we can then take into the room again and distill and understand the description we've made. Did it actually resonate with our front line and with our market? And from that, try to get to a conclusion. So the voice of the customer plays a role, but it comes on the back foot of facilitation of some of these core strategic choices inside the management team. Yeah, and with that, I think that was the last question. So thanks a lot for joining. I think we had super good show rate for this session. This was the last session in an installment of 4 webinars that we've done at Quadrant. Some of my colleagues have also recently talked about the marketing operating model. They've talked about creating the best sales pitch, and they've talked about sales management. So if you're interested in any of those topics, all of those webinars are available on our website. Thanks a lot for joining and taking the time out, and please feel free to reach out if any questions at the end of this session. Have a nice day.